Thank you, ISN, for inviting me to join all of you here today to speak about a pressing issue that lies at the intersection of environmental stewardship, justice, and human dignity. At that intersection is the urgent need for reform in the way we mine minerals in this country. Today, I'm going to talk about mining reform through the lens of the Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act. And while I will be talking about legislation at the federal level in Washington that is outdated and has to be modernized, I will also be talking about how legislation can advance clean energy and be about justice for communities, care for our common home, and responding to the moral call that Pope Francis lays out in Laudato Si and Laudate Deum. To understand the scale of the problem with mining in our country, it's important to understand what our current mining laws allow to happen, particularly the General Mining Law of 1872. For over 150 years, this law has allowed mining companies to claim vast areas of public land for mineral extraction without paying a cent in royalties. Think about that for a moment. In the 21st century, some of the world's largest and most profitable companies are still able to extract resources from land owned by the American people without giving anything back. Not to the communities affected or poisoned, not to the land itself, and certainly not to future generations. This 1872 law was passed in a very different time when our understanding of environmental impacts and economic justice was much more limited. And yet, we continue to operate under this law as if nothing has changed. The cost of this outdated system is staggering. We have more than 500,000 abandoned mines across the country. These are not just holes in the ground, they are sources of toxic waste that poison rivers, streams, and entire ecosystems. In fact, 40% of Western watersheds are affected by pollution from abandoned mines. Communities, especially rural, low-income, and indigenous communities, bear the brunt of this damage, dealing with contaminated drinking water, loss of wildlife, and barren landscapes. These are the very communities that often have the least power to advocate for themselves. Yet they are forced to live with the consequences of a system designed to benefit corporations, not people. This is a textbook example of what Pope Francis calls ecological debt in Laudato Si, the debt we owe to the earth and to those who are least responsible for environmental harm, yet suffer the most from it. Pope Francis reminds us that the earth herself, burdened and laid waste, is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. This reality is a direct result of an economic system that values profit over people, one that treats creation as an inexhaustible resource rather than a sacred trust. Now, as we look toward a future that must be powered by clean energy, we face a critical moment. The transition to renewable energy, wind, solar, electric vehicles, requires minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, and copper. These minerals are essential to building the batteries and technologies that will reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. But if we do not reform our mining laws now, this clean energy transition could perpetuate the very injustices we are trying to solve. It could deepen the wounds already inflicted on vulnerable communities, destroy more landscapes, and pollute more waterways. This is where the Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act comes in. It is an opportunity to fix our broken system and ensure that the transition to clean energy that is critical at this moment is one that is just, equitable, and sustainable. The Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act addresses the deep-rooted issues in our mining laws by focusing on several key reforms. First, the Act replaces the outdated claim and patent system with a leasing system. Right now, under the 1872 mining law, mining companies can stake a claim on any public land and extract minerals without paying royalties. Under this new legislation, a leasing system would be enacted, and companies would no longer have free rein over public lands. Instead, they would need to lease the land from the government, much like how oil and gas companies do already. This gives the government, acting on behalf of the people, greater control over where and how mining happens. It means decisions about mining would prioritize environmental sustainability, community needs, and long-term stewardship over short-term profit. This is crucial because not all land is equally suited for mining. Some places, like national parks, sacred indigenous lands, and critical wildlife habitats, should be off limits. The Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act would ensure greater protections for environmentally and culturally sensitive areas, preventing mining operations from encroaching on lands that hold spiritual, ecological, or cultural significance. Pope Francis reminds us in Laudato Si that we have a responsibility to protect these common spaces, which are meant to benefit everyone. By reforming how we manage mining on public lands, we honor that responsibility. Second, the Act would require mining companies to pay royalties for the minerals they extract from public lands. This is a basic principle of fairness. Right now, these companies are profiting from the use of our public lands without paying anything back. By establishing a royalty system, the Act would ensure that some of the profits from mining go back into the public treasury, which could be used to fund environmental cleanup and support the communities most affected by mining operations. This revenue could also help finance the transition to clean energy, ensuring that the move to renewable resources doesn't leave behind the people and places most vulnerable to exploitation. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the Act addresses the catastrophic issue of abandoned mine cleanup. As it stands, when mining companies finish extracting minerals, they can simply walk away, leaving behind toxic waste that can pollute the environment for generations. This is one of the great environmental injustices of our time, and it is the communities nearest to these sites that bear the cost. The Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act would require companies to post bonds that would cover the cost of reclaiming and restoring mined lands. This means the financial responsibility for cleaning up these sites would rest with the companies that created the problem, not with taxpayers or local communities. In his most recent exhortation, Laudate Deum, Pope Francis calls on all of us to act with urgency to protect our planet from further harm. He writes, "The effects of climate change will be felt by all, but they will disproportionately affect the most vulnerable who have done the least to cause it." This statement applies not only to the global climate crisis, but also to the specific issues we face in the realm of resource extraction. Those who benefit the least from mining are the ones who suffer the most from its consequences. That is why the reforms proposed in the Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act are not just necessary, they are a matter of justice. As we gather here today, I invite each of us to reflect on how we can support this effort. We are so excited that you will be calling on our legislators to pass the Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act. We can advocate for policies that protect the vulnerable, and we can continue to work for an economy that values people and planet over profit. As Pope Francis said in Laudato Si, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one and the same. Our work is to answer that cry with justice, compassion, and commitment.